Hello, I'm Brian from Boodleshire Aquatics, and today I'm going to be testing this client's 400-gallon coral reef aquarium. This is a bi-weekly maintenance client, so we come out twice a month, and I test a few parameters each visit, and then there's some that I only test once a month, like magnesium. But today I am testing nitrates, phosphates, alkalinity, and calcium, and I think I'm also going to be testing salinity and temperature as well. Salinity and temperature don't vary much if you are measuring your new water correctly, and there's a probe on here for temperature, but you never know. The probe could be incorrect, the heater could be broken, and you could be drifting on the temp, so you always just want to double check that because it's an important parameter. So you always want to double check that with the manual test every time. It's real easy. And usually the salinity probe I use has a thermometer on it anyway, so I get both readings at the same time. But I'm using all Hanna today, so this is the nitrate Hanna test kit, and I really like the Hannas because of the digital readout. They're hobbyist grade, so they're not going to give you the most scientifically accurate reading, but they are precise, they are consistent, and the digital readout makes it really easy to use. The calcium test kit is the only one that has extra steps. The rest are pretty simple, but the Hanna test kits are my favorite for this kind of simple testing. If you aren't familiar with Hanna, they are a colorimeter checker, so the reagent goes into the sample water, it turns it a color based off the concentration of whatever you're testing for, and then a light is shown through that cuvette inside the checker, and then a digital readout is displayed corresponding with that concentration of the parameter. The API test kits work in a similar fashion, but you're eyeballing the color against a chart, and you kind of have to twirl around like a ballerina to find the right lighting and see what the readout is. If you have any kind of colorblind or anything like that, it doesn't really work either, so the Hanna digital readouts are the best. Like I said, they're hobbyist grade test kits, so they're not super accurate. I know that my phosphate test kits read higher than the Triton ICP tests. I would probably say that Triton ICPs are going to be more accurate, but it is consistent, that discrepancy. Every time I run phosphate tests on a tank with Hanna's, like a bunch in a row, I do these tests every time for my reef clients. And then I run an ICP, it's always about 0.05, 0.07 difference every time, so I can rely at least on that discrepancy as being consistent. So I always know that whenever I test for something, I know where it's going to be, or where it should be. So yeah, the nitrate test kit is what I'm doing first here. It's a lot of shaking, 2 minutes aggressive shaking on this. You want to be consistent with your procedures. Everyone does it a little bit different. If you go online, people will say, oh, you have to refrigerate your reagents, or you have to shake the bottle upside down, or you have to close your eyes and when you shake the bottle, whatever. Everybody has their own little thing that they do. It doesn't really. Just follow the steps as closely as you can. Just make sure you do it the same every time, and that's really the key. Get as much of the reagent out of that sachet out of that packet there into the sample as possible, and then just be consistent. All right, I'm checking my time. This client started off with, what was it? I have my notes here. It was it maxed out my test kit. When I first started testing this client's tank, after I took over from the previous company, the nitrates and phosphates maxed out my Hannas. So they were both above, the nitrates were above 75 and the phosphates were above 2.5 parts per million. And over the course of several visits, several months, I think we're almost a year in now, I was able to bring down everything to manageable levels. I did use carbon and GFO, I still do, on this tank. The original company that installed it many years ago put in a 30-gallon water change vat on a 400-gallon aquarium. So it's difficult to do a full-size water change, and it's a bi-weekly client, so you can't do weekly water changes either. So sometimes you have to use chemical filtration in situations like that, because bringing 100 gallons, or not 100, but like 50 gallons of pre-made water in buckets every time is not feasible every time either. I don't like to use carbon and GFO in reef tanks. I think they pull out too much. GFO just pulls out phosphates. Carbon, I think, pulls out too much, but sometimes you do have to use it. This is the only account where I do use it. Alright, so here's the phosphate test kit, very similar to the nitrate. Have your sample water, make sure it's clean, zero it out, add your reagent, shake it up, put it in, and then hit the timer. I do the nitrate test kit first every time because it has a 7-minute set before it reads it, and the phosphate has a 2-minute or 3-minute set. So you start off with the one that has the longest set time first, and then you can do your other tests while that one is cooking, I guess you could say. Make sure you get all that reagent down into the corners there. Sometimes it just never works. You have to get a new packet. My trusty Leatherman. Keep that wherever I go. Works very well for things like this. And we're going to pour in that reagent as soon as I pull that cuvette out. This tank also runs bio-pellets, and there's a refugium above me where I'm sitting there now too. It's all the bio-pellets are on a separate pump. You can see the pump in the right part of the frame there because the manifold wasn't strong enough to move the pellets. But the refugium is plumbed into a manifold in the return. The return pump, which you can barely see it behind the phosphate box. It's Red Dragon. So it pushes out quite a bit of water, but the refugium is just full of Chaeto, and it has a Apex, or it's not Apex, Neptune refugium light on it. And it is full of Chaeto. It does very well. All kinds of algae in there, all kinds of little creatures swimming around. And then the GFO and the carbon are both in reactors as well. And depending on what I get with the test results here will determine whether or not I replace those media, how much of it I replace, if I need to add some, if the replacement amount is less or more than the week before. But this tank has been very consistent, luckily, after I got everything to where I kind of wanted it. At the end of this video, I'll have some footage of the display, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about, but corals in there are very happy. I know for a fact that, well, I guess I don't know for a fact. It's just an expression, I suppose. But when I first arrived, I'd say 80 to 90% of the fish in there had much of their fins missing. And I say missing because I don't know if it was aggression or if it was loss of tissue from nitrate poisoning. I did mention the nitrates were super high. There was a blonde and naso tang in there, still is, that is not aggressive now, but it's the only one without missing fins, and it was also the last one added. So I'm kind of thinking that there was some nitrate poisoning that resulted in some loss of fins for those guys. Still too early to tell if they're growing back or not, but since then I've added several fish and none of them have succumbed to any kind of nipping or loss of tissue. So, alright, press and hold the button on the phosphate checker, Gives you a 3-minute countdown there. Okay, next is alkalinity. I do dose sodium carbonate in this tank because there is a big colony of stylophora in here, and it's a big tank with lots of bio-pellets and microbiome, so lots of alkalinity gets used. I'm dosing 102 milliliters per day, and so you want to check alkalinity every time. It would be great if I could add a Trident water analyzer on this tank and a Trident NP, but we're not there yet with the client, so still haven't done that. But the Hanna's due for now. Just takes a little bit more of my time. The Trident water analyzers and the Trident MP are great in that they give you some peace of mind and some data, a lot of data to work off of. You would still, I would say, want to check on your manual tests at least once every couple months, just to make sure you're not drifting. So you can recalibrate your analyzers if you need to. This one's easy. You don't have to hold the button. Just press it, it'll give you your alkalinity readout. This tank stays between about 8 and 9 for alkalinity. Sometimes it goes up to 9.5 or 10. Last week it went up to 10.2, I think, and that was because the bio-pellets were not tumbling at a speed that I was comfortable with, and so I think I just kind of lost some my microbiome, or at least some of the bacteria population in the tank, and that lowered the alkalinity consumption, so there was a little bit higher amount of alkalinity in the tank than it was used to. But here we are adding the reagent. Like I said, this tank also is dosed with calcium, so that relationship between alkalinity and calcium is important, and you want to be pretty redundant in your testing when you're dosing that kind of stuff. Alright, let's write down some numbers here. 10.5, okay, we're still high on alkalinity. Nitrates are low, 8.9. That's really good. Before they were 11.1. So you can see all my notes on the right hand side there. I make sure that I write down what I did, so that way next time I can see, like, oh, alkalinity is still high, so I need to add more, or sorry, I need to reduce the amount of dosing per day. I didn't reduce last time because there was no point in reducing it if I wasn't sure there was a trend yet. So if you get one number, say 10.5, great, that doesn't mean anything. If you get a second number, 10.9, okay, still doesn't really mean anything. That's just 2 sample points, 2 data points. Then you get a third number the next time and it's like 11.4. You're like, okay, now I can tell we're trending up, time to lower the dosage. So you don't want to jump the gun and start lowering and raising the dosage on stuff if you don't have to. But the previous week, the alkalinity was lower. I know that it was around 9.5. So 2 weeks in a row, 2 visits in a row, 1 month in a row, I've been up to 10.5. So I'm going to write down on that tablet to lower the alkalinity. Alright, time for the calcium. The calcium test kit is the one that has the extra steps. It's not too complicated, but you add your RODI water and then your reagent A, and then just a very small amount of sample water. I think it's 0.1 milliliters, and then your powdered reagent last. You shake all that up and read it out. With this test, I have had issues in the past with it giving me a very aberrant number. So you'll be looking at whatever reason it gave you that false reading and trying to figure that out before you start assuming your calcium is super high. So if it maxes out, if your calcium reads 500 every time and then all of a sudden it reads, it maxes out your test kit at 600, whatever, you should do a second test. Don't assume that your calcium is that high. There was one time where I tested, I wasn't actually testing in this room, I was testing in the other room with the display, so I took some sample water with me, and I had taken sample water from the sump near the calcium dosing tube right after it dosed, which I didn't realize at the time, and then I was testing and the calcium maxed out the test kit, and I was like, what the heck? And I tested it again, maxed out the test kit, pulled out my stylophora, maxed out the test kit. I was like, gosh, this can't be right. But I was like, this can't be right, but 3 tests have told me it is. I still wasn't convinced, so I ended up leaving the calcium where it was. Actually, I ended up lowering it just by a few milliliters just to be safe, but not enough to really, make a heat. I didn't turn it off or anything. And then I ended up sending in an ICP test, and sure enough, the calcium was normal on the ICP test. So then later I realized that must have been what happened, because when I went to take a sample the next week, I noticed that right where I pulled that water sample from, the calcium was dispensing at that same time, and I actually caught it that time, and so I figured that's what happened. And I tested again that second visit on my Hannas, and it came out almost matched the ICP test, so... Again, you don't want to jump to conclusions. Take it slowly. Even if your calcium is that high, don't, or whatever parameter you're testing, even if it does jump like that, don't correct too quickly. I write everything down in the remarkable tablets. My other employee has one as well. This is not a plug for Remarkable, but I do like those tablets. They have a cloud, so I'll be at a client, write down notes, and then it's immediately uploaded to his tablet. If he ever goes to that client, he'll have my notes and vice versa. So we don't have to trade tablets or anything, or manually upload stuff. It's all just done automatically, which is a great time saver. The backlight is there is no backlight, so 2-week battery life on those things. You rarely have to ever charge them. They write like paper. You can organize all your clients' notes into folders and notebooks. I was using paper before, and after my 3rd notebook I filled, I was like, this is not tenable. I cannot, in 10 years or 5 years, I'm going to have 150 notebooks sitting on a bookshelf that are just full of notes from clients. That's not going to work. So I started researching e-ink tablets and came up with the Remarkable. They're both Remarkable 2s. The pros are overkill for what we need them for. Okay, looks like this is the last step here. Second to last step, I'm adding the sample at last. Do I know what I'm doing? There we go. Okay, so yeah, like I said, the sample for this test kit is about 0.1 milliliters. That's why you're using the micro pipette. With this test kit and with the magnesium test kit, you also want to make sure that there are no bubbles when you test it. It's pretty clear on that in the instructions, but I have gotten weird readings with a lot of bubbles in the test kit, but I'm not 100% convinced that it's a huge difference, so I actually haven't really thoroughly tested that theory yet, so don't take that claim too seriously, but I would just make sure that you get all the bubbles out of the inside. Usually just tap it, or what they recommend is you let it set in the checker for a few seconds. And I got a reading there. Let's see what we got. 436. Cool. It's about perfect. Alright, so now I'm thinking, what am I going to do? What do these numbers mean? What do these numbers mean relative to what I tested for last time? See, now I'm looking at the previous tests. I'm thinking, okay, so what trends am I seeing here? What is going up? What is going down? What is stable? What needs to be changed as a result of that? And then I'll make those notes. The gears are turning. Alright, looks like I'm going to lower alkalinity by 2 milliliters. So I did a quick calculation in my head there. 102 milliliters was dosing before, down to 100. So basically, if I want to lower from 10.5 to 10 over the course of 2 weeks, you take that 0.5, and then there's a formula you can use online to how many milliliters do I have to lower this by per volume to lower that 0.5 over a 2-week period, and then it came out as 2 milliliters. BRS has a great calculator you can use for that. You just punch in the data and then it tells you. Everything else is the same, just replace GFO, replace carbon, don't mess with calcium. The carbon I use is the 0.8 ROX carbon. It's super efficient. You don't have to use nearly as much of it. I just put it in a bag. I think I mentioned before that I use a reactor for it. I don't for the carbon, actually. I just stick that in a bag. You can see the bag stuffed underneath the pump there, and it's in a decent place for flow. And then cleaning. You want to clean out your cuvettes with RODI water. That's what I'm using there. I got a little dish full of RODI water. And remove all of the salt and sample water from all of the syringes and pipettes and cuvettes. And you don't have to dry them out, but just don't cap them so they can sort of dry out in the case. Put everything back exactly the way you found it. Everything has to be perfect. So yeah, this test, these tests I do for this aquarium every 2 weeks. The other coral reef aquariums I maintain also get these tests, plus or minus a couple others, and the frequency changes depending on the aquarium. But this one is a big aquarium with a lot of big corals in it. Every aquarium gets the same amount of attention. It doesn't matter if they're a little 20-gallon or a big 500-gallon. They all get the same amount of attention and care. But there are differences in what you're testing for each time. I have a client with a Trident analyzer and an NP, so I only hand test his stuff every couple months just to check make sure those are working correctly. But then I always test his, he has a probe for salinity and temperature on the Neptune as well, but I test that every time just because it's easy, and you want to make sure that you're being redundant in your testing. I like to be redundant in my testing. You don't, it's not the end of the world if you don't, but it's how I like to do it, so it's the way I do it. Okay, now that everything's tested, I will get to the rest of the maintenance on this aquarium. I'll be doing a lot of other work on it for the next couple hours, but at the end of this video I'll have some bonus footage of the display so you can kind of see what all this hard work goes into.